Social studies is such an important class, yet it is often taught in a way that causes students to disengage from what they're learning. Transferring the passion I have for this subject to my students has become a more achievable task after this class. We have learned what does not work in social studies classrooms, and how to make changes to ensure that what we are teaching creates engagement in our classes. Through relevant readings and lessons, this class has taught me to create good critical questions and engaging lesson plans. As a concurrent student, this class was far different than Specialization 1. Within the first week, we had talked about terms I had not had to consider previously. Our previous social studies class focused on creating lesson plans and sharing them with the class, using and collecting an abundance of appropriate resources, and examining different methods of teaching social studies. We did not read any scholarly articles, rather we had one textbook we examined in depth in only one class. Because of the dramatic differences between Specialization 1 and 2, my understanding of social studies has changed considerably. One of the biggest things that I found myself considering was the program of studies. I used this resource in many classes prior to Social Studies Specialization 2, but I didn't use it as it was supposed to be used. In the past, I never considered the front matter when examining this document, yet the front matter outlines the goals and objectives of social studies. Values and attitudes, knowledge and understanding, and skills and processes became especially useful to me. Anything you do as a social studies teacher should be able to fall within the framework of the front matter. I now feel more familiar with this document, and I feel I can utilize it to ensure that my lessons are in accordance to what the government expects students to learn. The next big concept I considered was historical thinking. As a pre-service teacher with a history degree, I'm the most interested in teaching students about history. But I realized I might be going about this the wrong way. Just because I'm interested in history doesn't mean every student will feel the same way. Failing to understand this concept can cause teachers to fall into ineffective paradigms. One such paradigm is content coverage. This is the idea that as a teacher we must cover a vast amount of material in a short amount of time. We become stuck in this notion of teaching content to a student who is an empty vessel. Yet as we discussed in class, students come to school with a foundation of knowledge. Teachers should learn to work with this knowledge rather than forcing students to spout out important dates and figures in an attempt to cover content. This concept is reinforced in Ghani's article. This concept was very relevant in my practicum at Central Memorial. I graduated from Central in 2011 and came back as a student teacher in 2014. The classes I taught were strikingly similar to the classes I attended as a student. Students watched films and then filled out worksheets. They'd read textbooks and then fill in worksheets. They were given readings and then were tasked to fill out a worksheet. While I understand worksheets can be beneficial, I found that at Central they reinforced the notion of content coverage. On the other side of the spectrum is the Apple paradigm. This content was discussed in class, and as we analyzed what types of programs fall into this paradigm, I realized I might be a culprit of this. In Specialization 1, we created lesson plans and presented them to the class, as if the class were our students. After all presentations, we were asked to vote for which project we thought was the best. This made an incentive to have a fun task for the class to complete. In one lesson, we picked grade 8 worldviews. We created an amazing race where students had to go to Italy, Japan, and Mexico to complete the race. In each location, students had to complete a task or roadblock. In our Aztec stop, students created headdresses out of replicated resources that were relevant to Aztec society. As I realize now, this was an Apple task. I still think a project such as this one could work, but I now understand it would need to be adjusted into a more authentic task that implicates the students. Instead of creating a project that has student engagement because it's fun, teachers should attempt to create engaging projects that are worth the student's time. Creating these types of tasks can happen if we consider Stanley's article. Stanley questions how Canadians consider the history of Canada. One way is through public memory, where the past is represented in media, museums, curriculums, monuments, and public ceremonies. An example we delved into in class was the Toronto Blue Jays, a Canadian team comprised mostly of American athletes. When the Jays won, Canadians were ecstatic. But why? The team is Canadian but not the players, so why do Canadians feel so implicated in the Jays winning the series? Acts such as these create a community in which Canadians feel they are connected because their team won. Such public memories comprise the way a lot of Canadians understand Canada. Additionally, there is the grand narrative, which varies depending on where you are in Canada. For example, the Canadian grand narrative may be different in Quebec than it is in Alberta, which we further discussed in the class discussion with Ghani. History in Canada needs to be taught at a more authentic level. Students should be exposed to real questions historians have to consider. How do we get into the mind of someone who lived 500 years ago? Asking students to take on the role of a historian will create more engaging lessons. Additionally, these lessons will help students understand the perspectives social studies teachers should be considering with the students. This concept is touched on in the Donald article, as well as in the FNMI classes. Aboriginal students are proven to feel more engaged if they feel directly connected with the material being learned. If the material is being presented at a deeper level, it will not only aid in teaching these perspectives, but it will aid in creating a space where Aboriginal students and other students alike feel implicated in what they are learning. One way to create a more authentic way of learning is to ask critical questions. Our explorations of through-line, critical, and essential questions were difficult to grasp, yet proved to be important in the way I think about social studies. Roland Case examines critical thinking in his article, where he explains, inviting students to think critically about subject matter is effective at promoting both understanding of the content and mastery of the skills. In order to get the students to think critically, the teacher must be able to ask critical questions that task students with making reasoned judgments and forming opinions among options, which are then judged on criteria. This way of thinking encourages students to understand what they are learning rather than recalling information for the purposes of a grade. Scott and Abbott tackled this issue in an examination of their own lesson plans. Being able to critically analyze your own lessons is key to creating better lessons that implicate the students in what they are learning. Social Studies is a course that covers a wide range of information throughout the grade levels. Teaching social studies is difficult, but rewarding when it is done correctly. This course has provided me with theories and literature to supplement my teaching strategies. It has helped me to be more critical about the lessons I'm giving my students. In such a broad unit, it's important that everything being assigned to the students is being done so with thorough consideration and purpose. Critical questions and historical thinking strategies in particular will be topics that I use as I become a better social studies teacher. The only way for me to truly make sure that I'm using these strategies properly is throughout my own teaching experience. I do hope that I can use these tools in my practicum to be sure that they're going to work for me and to help me develop as a teacher.